If you're looking for a new way to support the podcast, check out Dubby.gg, an energy supplement company trying to make a difference. There you can use code SIDEMISSION for 10% off your order. Thank you to Dubby for sponsoring this episode, and we hope you enjoy.
Welcome into the newest episode of Side Mission. I, like always, am your host, Rusty Ellis, joined by the boys, Kyle Lynch and Matt Beck, and we are continuing our series review of The Last of Us Season 2 on HBO, and today we're talking about, well, quite possibly the most important episode in terms of setting up the rest of Season 2, and likely the entirety of Season 3, and there's a lot to talk about. I think that depending on what circles on the internet you follow, you could have been led to believe that this episode was either disappointing or that it was the greatest thing that God has ever made in television. And I don't think that the answer is really either of those. I think it's somewhere in the middle. But again, we are going to talk about it. We'll go ahead and dive right in. So at this point in the episode, if you remember back to episode 1, and I do want to preface this as I'm going to try to preface all of these episodes. If you have not seen the episode yet, we are going to dive deep into spoilers. Every episode, we're diving deep into spoilers. So if you haven't watched it and you don't want it spoiled for you, go and watch it. Come back and listen to us afterwards. This review will still be here. So with that being said, obviously, at the end of episode 1, I think all three of us had fair amounts of questions with regards to pacing and how they're going to get through the entirety of Ellie's story in episode 2, or in episode 2, Jesus, in the second game, all in season 2. That's a mouthful. That's a weird way to word that, but whatever. I'm going to roll with it. Nonetheless, we ball. But we all had questions about that, and I feel like after this episode, we have even more questions with how in the world, in the next 5 episodes, they're going to get through the entirety of that, because I personally do not see it happening, and I think that's really, really bad pacing. Nonetheless, we are still in Jackson. We're still in Jackson, Wyoming, and at this point, there's a storm brewing, and there's this big blizzard that's on its way. It's headed straight for Jackson. It's hinted at very early on in this episode when Ellie points it out to Jesse when they go out on patrol. That is one of the first of many changes that I am not the hugest fan of, that she is out on patrol with Jesse and not Dina, because Dina is with Joel, because for some reason Tommy just does not go out on patrol at all in this episode, whereas in the game, he is the one that is with Joel. But she makes a comment to him about, oh, that storm, those clouds, that looks really bad. And Jesse kind of says, oh, that's going to pass right over us. It's nothing. Of course, doesn't end up being nothing. I will say one thing I liked about this aspect, and one thing that I think was introduced very subtly in episode 1, was the idea that the infected are using bodies of dead infected to burrow underneath the ground and basically stay insulated from the cold. It's how they're living. Because I don't know if either of you remember this. You probably both do. In the game, the first section that you play as Abby, you run into a lot of infected at one point, and it's not really explained how or where they came from or how they're all alive and they just came out of nowhere. I do like that this episode dives into that. That, when Abby has that section where she's got to crawl underneath the fence and they're all trying to crowd on top of her and Joel saves her, it gives us a bit of an explanation for, here's how there's so many infected. Here's where they were all hiding the entire time. And Kyle, I really, in terms of expanding on stuff from the game, that part I was actually a pretty big fan of.
Yeah, I think that in the ways that they do expand on what has already been told in the story, they do good. There are some things that we'll get to later that I think maybe didn't need to happen.
Yes.
But
more like one really big thing that didn't need to happen, but yeah.
I think that honestly, after this episode, I feel like there's a chance to recover from the pacing if they really focus. I mean, they're going to have to not add hardly anything because we do still have a lot to get to. But I do think that getting to see a little bit more of Joel before he's killed was nice, especially for people who didn't get to play the game. You know, this was that's it. That's the rest of Joel you're gonna get, and we got him a little bit in the beginning of the game, but this was Ellie's story. This was very clearly not Joel's. So, I think him also getting more screen time with Dina, I don't think they really interacted that much in the game. Not that we saw outside of like a couple of scenes. That whole scene where she went to his house, I thought was cool. I really liked that and that whole interaction.
Yeah, I'm with you in that. Like, I liked, and I said this in our review of episode 1. I liked that we saw a little bit more of their relationship, and I think that it makes them going out on patrol a little bit more relevant, because obviously these are two characters that do care about each other and that do have a friendship, and that Dina sees the stress that is on Joel's relationship with Ellie, and she would like to understand that and would like to help. Obviously, she's not going to get a chance to do that now, as we were all expecting. But I did like that we saw more of that. I just couldn't help but feel like it didn't really make much sense why Joel and Dina are on patrol and it's not Joel and Tommy. Because here's something for anyone who didn't play the game. And I know that of our listener base, that's probably a very, very, very small percentage of people. But for anybody that's listening that has not played the game, I felt like one of the things that gets talked about the least from Last of Us Part 2 is that, sure, the cycle of vengeance, it focuses primarily on Ellie and Abby. It focuses primarily on those two. But Tommy being present for Joel's death and not being able to save him is a part that does not get talked about, and now we don't have that. We don't have that now because Tommy was not present for it. Therefore, he will still end up likely blaming himself. He'll end up blaming himself still in all likelihood for Joel's death. But now it doesn't make as much narrative sense as it did before because he and Joel in the game were both trusting and they trusted the group from the WLF. They trusted Abby and her friends. He doesn't really have that now. And that's ultimately what sets Tommy on this path of wanting revenge as well in the game. And again, I feel like that's a part of the game that doesn't get talked about a lot. The other narrative part of this game, since Kyle mentioned it, and we will go ahead and dive right in, and I do want to praise part of it because the inside look, the behind the scenes at the end of this episode, one of my favorite behind the scenes that they've ever done. One of my favorites that they've ever done. Because when they talked about shooting for this blizzard and the weather and dealing with it, this was not special effects. This was what they dealt with. This is what they shot this episode in. They shot this episode in a massive storm and they used it as part of the story. And I love that. I love the production value in this episode. It has that in spades. The infected attack on Jackson is such a cool thing to witness because, again, we don't see that in the game, and it's something that I don't think is ever really referred to. I'm not sure that in the game it even really happens. But, again, it goes a long way to explain here's why there are a bunch of infected out of nowhere. The issue becomes how much of a necessity should that part of the episode have been? And Matt, I'll let you give your take on it, but if it was me giving mine, personally, I felt that this was excess that in terms of pacing, they really couldn't afford.
Yeah, because as it currently stands, we really don't know where the season's going to end. And when you're adding stuff, especially something that didn't happen in the game, but takes majority of the episode with the attack on Jackson, it makes it even more difficult for people who play the game to place exactly like what direction it's going. Like we know what happens in the game after Joel dies. We don't know what's going to happen in the next episode. For all we know, this could be a whole episode dedicated to Jackson grieving Joel. Like that's a potential, a possibility. And I really did appreciate the whole getting this moment, this action sequence with Jackson, because I like the fact that we kind of see Jackson in a new light, how they take defense and how they're prepared to combat the infected, which I thought was really cool. How they had like the high up walls and they were dropping the oil tanks down on them and then setting them on fire. I thought that was really cool. I think it was honestly like it was kind of one of those moments where I was on the edge of my seat because, I mean, it felt like just about anybody in Jackson was, was free game to kill. I was like, so what? Did they not send Tommy off? Are they just going to completely change his character? Like, he's not with Joel, he's in Jackson. Like, are they actually going to kill him? Especially in that moment where he's, being chased by the bloater.
Yes.
Yeah, like I actually had a moment of like, no way, they may actually do that because, like, again, the show is getting to this point where it's kind of unpredictable. Like season one, outside of the Bill and Frank episode, kind of really followed the game to a T. And then we get to season two and how it's playing out. And like I said, I don't know how episode 3 is gonna go. Like the way that they switched who Dina was with on the patrol. The thing is, the game gave us a really good look at Ellie and Dina's relationship, and like we got that whole moment with them. I'm going to have a hard time really seeing the relationship, that type of chemistry. Again, we did talk about the chemistry in the last episode, Rusty, between the actress that played Dina and then of Ellie, and we didn't really see the chemistry there. So I was like, I'm going to give it a chance because if they actually have them together and they do this scene, maybe it'll work. But now we're not going to know that because they decided to change it up.
Yeah, that's another unfortunate consequence of changing up who was on patrols is that I really liked Isabella Merced in the first episode. I thought that she was really good as Dina. I really liked her character a lot, and I've liked her in a lot of movies that she's been in. Obviously, I mentioned in episode 1, most notably Alien Romulus. Really enjoyed her performance in that movie as well. And I felt like you're 100% right in the sense that them going on patrol together gives us a chance to establish that chemistry. And they more or less cut that out entirely. And that's frustrating because your chance to build this believable relationship, are you going to do that on the way to Seattle now? Are you going to do that in Seattle for Seattle Day 1? Like, what? The problem is that at that point, Ellie had started... The problem at that point is that Ellie at that point has already lost Joel. So she's already on this path to vengeance. She's angry, she's bitter, she is vengeful. In the beginning of the game, obviously we don't find out till the very end, but in the beginning of the game, she and Joel at that point have begun their path towards reconciliation. So Ellie might not be this happy-go-lucky character, but there's at least hope. Now, you've kind of more or less done away with all of that hope, and you're hinging this chemistry on what we see when they go to Seattle. And I do feel like that is one of the many changes they made that did not benefit it. I will say, in terms of one of my favorite moments of this episode, I loved the showdown with Tommy and the bloater. I loved that. Like, for me, that was very much, I was edge of my seat. I was like, are they going to kill Tommy off? Is he going to survive this? Is this going to be the first, like, holy crap moment of this season? And it felt tense. It felt very, very action heavy, and I loved that because it was gritty, it was dirty, it wasn't over choreographed. I loved that, and I felt like that was awesome. And again, I said it in episode 1. I said it a lot in season 1 of our reviews there. I love Gabriel Luna as Tommy. I feel like he has brought something to this character that's a little bit different than what Jeffrey Pierce brought to the character in the game, and yet both of these depictions work so well for me. I really enjoyed that. Now let's get to the elephant in the room, and let's get to my least favorite thing through these first 2 episodes, and I've told you both about this. I mentioned it in episode 1. I'm even more disappointed and somewhat irritated by it in episode 2. And that has been the handling of Abby. I'm beyond disappointed with how the showrunners, how Neil Druckmann specifically, as the creator of the games, I'm very disappointed with how they've handled her. Because one of the biggest things to Abby's character in the games is the mystery around her. We know nothing about her. We know nothing about her motivations. We know nothing about why she sets out to kill Joel. We don't know any of that. And in these first 2 episodes, they have eliminated all of that mystery. Something that you find out in terms of her motivation, why she kills him. You find that out in the game, halfway through the game. 15, 20 hours into the game, you find that out. Here, they just tell you. And that I don't want to say that pisses me off, but for all the people that have been critical of Caitlin Dever and her portrayal as Abby, what is she supposed to do when the writing is this fucking terrible? What is she supposed to do? Because you two might disagree with me, and that's fine. I will own it if I'm the only one that believes this. I think the biggest problem in these first 2 episodes is the writing has been god-awful. And the writing specifically for Abby has been a travesty. Caitlin Dever is doing the best that she fucking can. She is doing the best she can to make the most out of it, and she has been written as this character that is just as open as a book, and that's not the character that Abby is in the game. I know that makes me sound like a game purist, and it makes me sound like those people that, the movie wasn't exactly like the book, therefore the book's better. I'm not saying that. I don't want to sound like that. But there were some things that you really didn't need to change. And Kyle, for me, this is the hill that I am willing to die on. This is one of those things that did not need to be changed. Abby's character so far has not been well done these first 2 episodes.
I agree, honestly. I mean, don't get me wrong. I would let Caitlin Dever club me to death any day.
It's not a problem. It's not a problem with her performance. It's not a problem with her.
Yeah.
That's what I really want to make clear. It's not a problem with her. It's a problem with the people that are directing her.
I thought that one of the wildest parts was how they made her actually look fine as fuck while she was beating the shit out of Joel. I said, "Go, Abby, go! Kill his ass!"
You're rooting for her.
No, but for real though, I'll stop saying fair. I agree. I think that one of the biggest issues with them telling us that, oh, well, Joel killed my dad is that does not do anything for the viewers who are going to hate Abby for over a year. You have to remember, there's going to be an entire year before, and this is the biggest gamble. I've been worried about this for a long time, and obviously we will not see how this pays off until Season 3, but the reason the game worked so well is because after you finish the first half of Ellie's story, you go immediately into playing Abby's. And you're mad, you're shocked, you're like, what the fuck is going on? But you just keep going. People are going to sit and stew for a year. I do not believe they're going to forgive Abby or even see her side, because I think if we waited an entire year not knowing why the fuck she killed Joel, it would have made a bigger impact when we get to her side of the story. We see what happened, we understand her journey and where she is now, and then go back to Ellie. But you just said it all in the beginning. You were like, oh, I was part of the Fireflies. You showed the whole damn scene where he killed her, and then where he killed her dad, and then you showed her walking in. Like, I think some of that y'all should have maybe saved this for Abby's story, but what is there to tell now? They're just gonna pick up where she's going to kill Joel. Who gives a fuck? Because we already know what happens. You might as well pick it up where Ellie's at. Like, it's frustrating because I don't even see a point to go into Abby's side now. And that was the biggest part of the game, was why the fuck am I playing as Abby? And then by the time you get to the end of the game, you feel sympathetic for Abby. You might even be rooting for Abby. Some people became more of a fan of Abby than they did Ellie. I think that this is not the way I wanted it to go. I'm very, very disappointed in every aspect of how they pulled this off, because, like Rusty said, there is zero mystery, and my biggest fear is that people are not going to get the message from this show that they were portraying with the game. There's a very, very clear way the ending of this game is supposed to make you feel, and for the love of God, if they do the same ending, people are going to bomb that final episode harder than any show has ever been review bombed, because if you know what happens at the end of Last of Us Part 2, sitting for a year and stewing with that is not going to make the end any better. In fact, it's probably going to piss you off more. I'm pissed off now, and we're 2 episodes in. Not to, like Rusty said, not to sound like a video game purist, but from solely storytelling standpoints, I failed to see where they pick up on Season 2 that isn't just retelling what I already know. You're beating a dead horse at that point, and it's like, okay, I don't even give a shit about Abby. I just want to go back to Ellie and see how this ends, because I know why Abby killed Joel. So, her story is not going to be nearly as impactful, unfortunately, in my opinion.
Bingo. That's exactly it. That's the problem. And what you said about the ending of this, I'm not going to spoil the ending of the game, because it's very likely that the ending we get in Season 3 is going to be very, very similar to that. I doubt that they make any groundbreaking changes to that. I'm not going to spoil how it ends, but with how they've handled Abby, if they continue handling her like this, which we have no reason to believe that it will be any different moving forward, that ending is going to piss off everybody. People hated the ending of this game. That people that did not like the game hated the ending more than anything else. Maybe more than anything outside of Joel's death. Which I'll get to that in a second, because we have plenty to say about that as well, and how much it was sterilized to all hell when it should not have been. But you're going to get to the ending in the show, and you're going to hate it, because they told you everything about Abby, all her motivations, and they didn't force you to see her point of view. They didn't force you to see that by spending an entire season with her, seeing her redemption arc. You're not going to have that same effect. And that's the problem. And I think the worst part of all this is that it would be one thing if Neil Druckmann had nothing to do with this. It'd be one thing. He is one of the executive producers. He knows the issues that people had, but he also knew how he wrote it. He knew why it worked. So that little thing about him telling all the producers and all the people that worked on it, all the writers, not to play the games, hey, Neil, maybe that wasn't such a good call. Maybe that wasn't a good decision. It doesn't look like it 2 episodes in. And again, want to stress this, and I want to actually credit Pedro Pascal with something, because I've seen a lot of behind the scenes and a lot of interviews over the last couple of days, and I have to praise this man for something. Because he knew when he read the script, he knew what a lot of people's reaction to Abby and what a lot of people's reaction to Caitlin Dever would be. He knew that she was going to get a lot of hate because of what her character was going to do, and by God, that man has been the best shield possible for any of that hate. He has backed her 100%. He has been like, she is such a phenomenal human being, and that, you know, she's one of the best people you'll ever work with if you're in this industry. She's one of the easiest people to work with if you're in this industry. She's one of the best at that. He has been the biggest shield for her, and I cannot praise that man enough. And I wish, and I'm not saying that Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson didn't, but I wish that Laura Bailey had had that kind of shield when she voiced Abby. I wish that she had that. Because Laura Bailey got a shit ton of hate when she should never have. Her performance as Abby in the game is fucking incredible. And I wish that she had this kind of shield. Doesn't change the fact that when she won, best performance at the Game Awards, doesn't change the fact that she earned that, or that wasn't a great moment and a rewarding moment for me as a fan of the game to see her get rewarded like that. But Caitlin Dever is not the problem with this. The problem is you have people, some of which that are involved with the game, that seemingly lost all clue of what made Abby so good in the game. Was that you didn't know why she did what she did, and then for 15 hours, you were forced to walk in her shoes and see her perspective. And that's why it worked. And here, we don't have that. This season's going to end. People are going to hate Abby, and you're never going to learn her point. You're never going to want to see her point of view, because we already know what her point of view is. It's embarrassing. It's been poorly handled, and I'm sorry. If you're one of those that you're arguing that it hasn't been, you are wrong. You're wrong. It's that simple. There's no argument that I can see. Now let's talk about Joel's actual death. Because when I first watched it, I didn't have a huge issue with it. And even now, I don't have a massive issue with it. It's still pretty gruesome. It's still pretty brutal. It does not change the fact that it was way over-sterilized when it did not need to be. Because I'm sorry, him getting beaten to death with a golf club has a lot more emotional weight to it and a lot more impact than him being beaten to death 90% of the way and then being stabbed through the neck by a broken golf club. It just does not have the same impact. And Matt, I'll let you talk about what you thought about that. If you agreed, if you disagreed with me. I felt like after watching this episode back, I was like, this does not carry the same impact that the games version carried.
No, I'm going to have to agree. I think the one thing that I feel like the showrunners are trying to do with the show is they were trying to diminish the severity of Joel's death, the brutality of it, because I think that they try to want to lessen the impact that it's going to take on the modern audience who are just watching this show for the first time. So, it doesn't get as much hate as in the game did. And unfortunately, I mean, it was really sad in the game, obviously. But you looking back at it, you realize everything that led up to it and why it happened, and it just makes sense. And I guess the way that they're trying to do it in the show is make it just not as impactful. I mean, you're about to kill one of the most popular characters in the series. I mean, Ellie's popular, but Joel, everybody loves Joel. You know what I mean? Like people who didn't even play the game start watching the show immediately love Joel because they understood his plight. He was a father who lost his daughter, and he had to grow up in this or continue in this world after he lost his daughter in this gritty world full of infected, and any day you could be killed. And he was just, in a way, he was a relatable character. So obviously, I feel like the showrunners were not looking forward to having to get rid of him because it had to happen. They weren't going to change that. And to be honest, correct me if I'm wrong, Rusty, in the game, Joel does actually not know why Abby's doing what she's doing. Whereas in the show, she tells him what he did. And I'm like, well, why did you do that? Like, honestly, it made it more impactful. Joel not realizing why this woman that he saved is killing him. Where in the show, she basically is like, yeah, you killed my dad. He wasn't armed. And I'm like, I mean, he had a scalpel in his hand. I'm pretty sure that's considered armed. So that also was a little bit less of an impact. And honestly, the Dina being there did not work for me because all they did was put her to sleep. She did a fantastic job with the role in that scene. Like I felt really bad for her because Tommy just gets fucking beat up. And she just gets put to sleep. And there's less impact for me there as well. But one of the other things I think bothers me is the fact that Joel has to look at Jackson on fire, not knowing what's going on, not knowing if Tommy's alive, if Ellie's alive, and that really makes it just a little bit worse for me because I'm like, well, that's just not fair. He has to see that before he dies, and there's nothing he could do about it because once he's shot in the leg, Joel knew he was not leaving the room that night. You know what I mean? And on top of that, I think I saw this comment online that had me in stitches where someone was like, yeah, the Seattle team actually looks like a bunch of Starbucks baristas. Yes. They don't look like a threatening militia group. And I thought that was just very accurate.
Here's my thing on that. I hate to cut you off. Here's my thing on that. And here's where I had a problem with that as well. And I guess that can jump us into this part of the episode is that my issue with that is that in the game, and I know there are going to be people that only watch the show that go, oh, you just keep comparing to the game. Yeah, it's written based on a game, dumbass. Of course we are. But, I mean, if you have a problem with that, then I'm sorry. You're listening to the wrong podcast. And if that's the case, I don't know what to tell you. But, in the game, there's very much a hesitance, and that they're like, I'm not sure what we're doing here is right, torturing this guy. I don't know how it's any different than what he did killing Abby's father, but we're going to support it because this is one of our friends and this is her crusade. We're going to support it. In the show, they don't want anything to do with this. In the show, they're like Owen's whole thing in the show, which, by the way, I don't have, again, any issue with any of the portrayals of any of the characters in the show. Really, outside of Bella Ramsey as Ellie 5 years later. I think she's been terrible. But, I don't have a problem with the portrayal. I have a problem that Owen in the game is very hesitant where Abby's very reckless, and she's like, let's corner this patrol. We'll make them tell us where Joel is. And he's like, okay, then what? Then what? In the show, Owen just jumps right into when they ask him, what's your plan after she leaves, is my plan is to convince her that we need to leave. They don't want anything to do with this. And that, to me, it takes away, like, they're supposed to be vilified too because they're a part of it. Do you remember, Matt, the first moment, that chilling moment in the game where Joel says his name and everyone in the group all of a sudden, like, their ears perk up and they're like, oh my God, it's him. There's no moment like that here. And it's like, what's the point of all this? Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, exactly. Like, to be honest, when I think the reason why we kind of got that swap between Tommy and Dina is the fact that Dina is not experienced in this world, so clearly her just yelling out Joel's name in front of some strangers, she's not going to see the repercussions that could come. Whereas, in the game, Tommy and Joel are veterans. They are hardened veterans who have experienced this world, who know that keeping your identity secret is the key to survival. But Dina's just like, Joel, we gotta go. You know what I mean? And yeah, like that right there, that tension was not in the scene there because we knew it was going to happen. And unfortunately, it just did not leave the same type of impact that the game had.
Can I also ask, did either of you feel like it was really awkward in the middle of this torture scene when Abby, like, compliments how Joel is kind of handsome?
Yeah, I called him handsome. That was weird.
I was like, what are we doing?
Also, why she talk so damn much? She did
Why
not
she
do that
smiling?
in the game.
She did not. That's a huge departure from character.
Yeah, that's also where we find out the whole I was a firefly and you killed my dad and blah blah blah. Like, I liked it when she just said, I'm gonna kill you, and that's all you fucking know about me. That was cold. That was Abby. This Abby is too emotional, in my opinion. Abby was emotional at the right points in part 2, but damn, man, she was fucking about brought to tears. I'm like, you're about to kill him, man. You shot him in the knee. You're about to beat him to death. You should not be over here crying about your dead daddy. You should be angry. You should, like, in the game, dude, she was furious. And I'm gonna say the same thing that I told my family when we watched this. You people who watched the show and did not play the game, you got off easy. Because this 100%. Is not how he died in the game. In the game, she just kept beating him with that golf club in front of Ellie until his brains were on the floor. She did not stop. His face was unrecognizable. The fact that she stopped midway through and just stabbed him in the neck, she showed mercy. And the video game Abby did not. She wanted him to literally be beat to death. No quickness about it.
Like, the one line in this that I was like, oh my God, that's Abby. Like, that's Abby to the core, was a line that wasn't even in the game. Like, the line of, you stupid old man, you don't get to rush this. I was just like, that doesn't have the same weight because you've sat there and you've spent this entire time monologuing.
Yeah.
Like, you've done all this. The one line that I was like, oh, that's Abby, was when he said, I saved your life, and she whipped around with a shotgun and said, what life? That was the one moment where I was like, oh, that's Abby right there. That is Abby. Like, because that was cold. It was evil, and it's what her character is in the first half of this game. That's exactly what it is. So it saddens me that a character that has so much depth to it has been dragged through the mud because of piss poor writing. And it's really a shame because this episode should have been one of the best one of any of the 3 seasons, maybe more at this point, who knows. Should have been one of the best episodes of the series. And for me, and it sounds like for both of you, it just wasn't. It very much was not. And here's the last thing I'll say about the sterilization of the violence and of Joel's death. And Matt, I would like to ask you a question. It's going to sound like I'm coming after you, but I promise to God I'm not.
Okay.
When I say HBO television, what's the first show you think of?
HBO television, the first show I think of, I don't know why, but it's Game of Thrones.
But why are we sterilizing this so much?
Yep.
What are we doing?
Yeah, they didn't hold back.
But Game
Red
of
Wedding?
Thrones did not hold back. It did not hold back at any point. So why are we holding back here? Why are we sterilizing this? Like, come on, man. You had us eating out of the palm of your hand in season 1 because it was real, it was gritty, and it didn't hold back. And now all of a sudden you've decided it's time for kid gloves. Good luck with Seattle. Good luck with the kid gloves there. Good luck. Because I don't know how you're going to be able to do that for 5 more episodes. By the way, I say 5 more episodes, and this is the last thing I'll say before we call it an episode, because I will say this has been a fantastic episode, and I have enjoyed bitching about this episode with you guys, because it has been almost cathartic for me to get this out, because I want to be honest, I didn't hate this episode. I thought this episode was fun at points. I thought this episode was really, really entertaining at points, but it's been... Oh, it frustrates me. I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a spoiler alert. There's no way in hell that any part of Seattle is in episode 3. I can already tell you, there's no way. And if it's not, if Seattle is not at all a part of episode 3, there's no way you're getting through all of Ellie's story in 4 episodes. There's just not. Kyle, you had something to add?
Yeah, I want to say that when we went from the first game to the second game was also praised for how much more realistic the violence was. Now, in a TV show, obviously, the violence is realism because it's live action, but what I did expect was a push more. You know, in the first season, there was some pretty violent scenes, but the second game was known for its grit because we had a big graphical upgrade. There was a lot more they could do, and I was saying before this season started, I was telling everybody, I was like, man, I'm excited to see how they amp this shit up like they did in the game. The first episode hardly had anything in it, and this, one of the goriest scenes in the game, was very much downplayed. While I did love the whole... I have a love-hate, because I loved the attack on Jackson. I also hated that they didn't put it in the first episode, because the pacing... But that also, I felt like, I don't know, you could have showed a little bit more, and it really does feel sanitized, whereas in the game, like I said, it went so much further. It went so much more violent, and not saying that, I need this to be all blood and gore, but I did expect more than Season 1, especially with a bigger budget. I've been kind of let down by that.
I liked a lot. There were a lot of things that I thought this episode did really well. The production value is up there. Again, I have to credit the crew behind the scenes for making this as real as possible. And again, if you haven't seen the behind the scenes, please go watch it, because it'll give you a whole new level of appreciation for the work that this production team and these actors and actresses went through in putting this together. You will appreciate it so much more when you see the behind the scenes. But my God, the people that spent years ragging on the writing of the second game, I don't want to hear another damn word, because the writing for this second season has been abysmal. And I will not hear an argument otherwise. So hopefully hopefully episode 3, maybe season 3 at this point, who knows. Hopefully episode 3 does at least a little bit to start to rectify this, to get us on the right track. But again, if halfway through this episode we are not in Seattle, I don't see how they make it work. So that is going to do it for this episode of Side Mission. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Side Mission Pod. You can check us out on Facebook as well at Side Mission Podcast. For the boys, for Kyle, for Matt, I'm Rusty. Thanks for listening.
Yeah.